that we got lined up for you are Ask Me Anything Pro-Life Edition. So I have some great friends joining me today. We have Mackenzie Rogers, the March for Life Grassroots Project Manager, Devin Senna, the Live Action Social Media Director, and Cassie Dillon, the President and Founder of Lone Conservative. So thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
It's so good to see everyone's faces after several weeks of being shut into my house. So it's really fun to meet you guys. So this is just so exciting to see so many young faces as part of the pro-life movement. And it's just great to have all you guys joining today. All of you have such a unique story as being part of the pro-life movement. And I just would love to kind of dive into talking about how you all got involved with it, what it's been like either being a voice in the pro-life movement or working full-time for it. And then we're going to be opening it up to asking all of our followers today to send in some questions and help them learn more about some pro-life apologetics, how to be part of this pro-life generation, and being just a voice for life, either in their classroom, on a college campus, or as they start entering into the professional world. So yeah.
Great.
So to kind of start things off, we'll start with Mackenzie answering this, but how did you guys first get involved in the pro-life movement?
Well, first of all, and Claire, thanks for having us here. It's sad to not see you in the office every day like usual, but I guess this goes back kind of a while. I kind of just grew up in a pro-life household. Both of my parents went to their first March for Life back in the early 80s or the mid 80s. They were both, my mom was a counselor at a women's pregnancy center, and both my parents had been arrested at one point for peacefully protesting outside of an abortion clinic. So it's safe to say that I grew up sort of in the pro-life movement, but was almost like intimidated myself by the sort of like heroism that I saw in, getting arrested and going to these big events and things. And it just, to me, seemed almost unattainable for a long time. I think the first time that I went to my first March for Life was when I was probably in the 6 or 7 range, and have just gone every year since then. So to now be working for the March for Life is crazy, but a long time coming, I would say. I spent a few years working in a for-profit company. I was working really long, hard hours and just sort of not feeling like my soul was benefiting in any way from the work that I was doing. And so when I decided it was time for a change, really the only thing I could see myself transitioning into was the pro-life movement in a professional sense. A lot of my friends were probably getting really sick of me because I'm really big into current events and hearing everything that's always going on in the pro-life movement. And I just can't stop myself from talking about it and debating with people and having sort of like philosophical or theological debates on any subject, really. And so a lot of my friends kept mentioning like, okay, you should probably find an outlet for this, because I just couldn't find the right way to express, my concerns and my passion for the pro-life movement, except for just like pulling my coworkers aside and being like, did you know this is happening? And so it was really, I think, placed on my heart that I had several people in my life say, hey, you're good at this and you can tell you're passionate about it. And I think you should try and funnel that into some other, bigger part of your life. So it just worked out really well that the March for Life had a position open that ended up, actually the position I'm in sort of worked itself out. And so it's been an answer to a lot of prayers and just everything that I was hoping for in terms of the people that I'm meeting, the work that we're doing, and just the message that we're working to build in this country. So yeah, that's how I ended up here, but it's sort of woven its way throughout my whole life, I guess you could say.
And now you get coworkers like me to gush over
Absolutely.
14 that you write Supreme Court cases.
Absolutely.
So Devin, how about yourself? How did you first get involved in the pro-life movement?
Yeah, so throughout high school, I had a really strong passion for politics and just a longing for justice throughout our society. At the time, life wasn't the #1 issue I was advocating for. But in late 2017, I became incredibly convicted of just the reality that without the right to life, none of our other rights matter very much, right? And so this conviction immediately shifted my priorities to fighting to end abortion, which kills 2,400 innocent, defenseless preborn children every day in America. So starting from there, I built out a small nonprofit. And then from there, I joined the live action team, and I'm thrilled to be in the fight.
Oh, awesome. And we love having you there. It's been great becoming friends with you through all of the live action and March for Life partnerships. And then, Cassie, you take on the pro-life issue in a little bit different of a way, but how'd you first get so engaged in the life topic and decide to be such a vocal spokesperson for it?
So I was not always pro-life. I only became pro-life probably about 4 to 5 years ago when I was a freshman in college. So in high school, I was engaged in politics as well, like Devin, and I knew I was conservative. I was leaning that way. When I got to college, I definitely found out I was conservative, but I was not pro-life. And I remember my freshman year of college going to a few conferences and still not being on board with the pro-life issue. And it's kind of an interesting story. I have family things, which I'll get into, but at this conference, there was one speaker who started making fun of the belief of being pro-choice or pro-abortion. He made fun of it. He showed me the irony and the absurdity of believing that. And it wasn't until I heard a joke about it where I thought, wow, why would I believe that? He's right. And so then just from that one little joke, it started as a spark. And I really started to look more into the pro-life movement and the pro-life issues. And then I realized that it didn't make sense for me not to be pro-life because my family has been impacted by abortion and by issues that would lead people to abortion. My mother, she was conceived in rape, and my mother also had 2 abortions in her life, which she does regret. So, you know, this issue has impacted me in so many different ways, but I think it's kind of interesting to think that it started from a joke. I think humor is a good way to share awareness of things. It gets people's attention, and I didn't realize the absurdity of my thoughts until that conference. So I still talk to that person, and I'm really happy they changed my mind.
Oh, I love it. So Devin and Mackenzie, you guys both work full-time in the pro-life movement. Could you tell us a little bit of what that's like?
Devin, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So I mean, it is one of the most rewarding jobs you can have, right? So 53% of Live Action's followers are under the age of 24, which I think is so amazing because it uniquely positions us to reach, you know, a large majority of the women who are considering abortion. And so seeing young women regularly reach out to Live Action to tell us that because they saw our content, they rejected abortion, it's just so amazing, right? Like if they had not seen our videos, their children would be dead. Like it's so incredible that we get to play a part in building a culture of life. One comment that we received a few weeks ago says, "I just want to thank y'all for opening my eyes. I got pregnant last year at the age of 17. I'm not even going to lie. Abortion crossed my mind, and at one point or another. But thanks to y'all, you made me see the true evil of taking away a human life. I'm now 18 with a beautiful, healthy 3-month-old, and I will always choose life." So stories like that make everything so rewarding and so beautiful. It's really one of the best social justice movements to be on board with. And with that said, it's not the easiest, as many on this call can attest to, because we are frontline warriors. We are literally rescuing babies from death. So it can take a toll. But you know, despite losses occasionally and some setbacks, if all of our work saves just one child, it's all worth it.
Mm-hmm. So
absolutely. I can echo a lot of those same sentiments, and Claire, I'm sure you could as well. You know, we're on the same team, and we see a lot of the same beauty in our workplace and in all the events that we go to and the events that we host and things like that. But and you might know better like what our social media demographic is. That's more in your wheelhouse there. But I feel like at the March for Life, we have probably sort of an overarching demographic, a lot of people who have been in the pro-life movement for, the last 40 years since Roe v. Wade. And so I myself have experienced this feeling of almost like the passing of the torch in a lot of ways as well. Like my mom and my mom's friends and all of the people that she, was an activist with for so long now feel like they expected abortion to be abolished in their generation, and now they're seeing that this next generation is taking on that baton and taking it to new heights, really. And so that's really the cool thing for me to see, is to have people who are from previous generations put so much faith in us to do the work that we're doing. And so the positivity that comes with that, the encouragement, the prayer that people, put behind our work is just really beautiful. And I don't think I've met one single person that cares more about like the work, the hours they're spending or the money they're making, like more than they care about the mission. And coming from the for-profit world and working 60 hours a week, it's a night and day difference to see really how the pro-life movement operates. And maybe other, mission-driven nonprofits are a similar way. But for someone my age, coming from sort of the high-powered corporate world, it's such a breath of fresh air that we all base our work ethic in our mission and in the state of our like souls, I guess you could say. We just are, we feel called to this more than we feel like we're driven by money or by profits and things like that. And that's so refreshing.
Oh, thank you for that, guys. So with like working in such a beautiful movement and building up a culture of life and promoting the dignity of life, I'm sure all of us just have a million amazing stories and experiences that we've just gotten to have. But if you guys could pick like one of your most amazing experiences, your best experience being a voice in the pro-life movement, what would it be? Cassie, do you want to start us off?
Sure. And I just want to say, I'm not bringing this example up just because you guys are interviewing me, but one of the most powerful experiences I had was at the March for Life. It was my first year there. I've had many experiences. 2 years ago, I made a video where I interviewed people and I heard amazing, powerful stories. But my first one, which was about a year after I became pro-life, a year or two, I met this one girl, and obviously there's many people who are at risk for abortion, women in some countries, people who have parents in poverty. But it's when I talk to people who are disabled and recognize that people who have the same disabilities as them are being aborted because doctors are telling them to, or as we see with people with Down syndrome in Europe and even in the US. So when I met a girl at my first March for Life, and she was talking about how she would be aborted in some European countries, doctors would recommend to abort her. And she was talking about the value of her life. She was blind. She had many disabilities. She had crutches and she was like, but I'm still happy I'm alive. And we hear too often from the other side that you shouldn't allow a disabled person to be born because they'll suffer. And that's just a terrible argument, especially when you hear that with people in poverty. I grew up in poverty. My family was on welfare. Does that mean that I should not be alive? No, that's not what that means. My mom did struggle, but that doesn't mean that I didn't deserve life. So I think meeting that girl really touched me. I remember we had a moment where we cried together, and it really put things in perspective for me.
Thanks. Devin, what about yourself?
I would echo Cassie in that I think the March for Life is really one of the best experiences that anyone can have. Obviously, there's other great experiences as well in the pro-life movement, but just being at the March for Life, present there with hundreds of thousands of people who stand with us and are standing with the children in the womb and in defense of life, I think is just beautiful. I'm always just profoundly moved by that.
Wow. Yeah, I can totally echo that. And I know from my whole life going since I was really little to the March for Life every year, just that like that high you sort of ride after the March for Life, where you see the beauty of the hundreds of thousands of people there and everyone, singing songs and walking alongside each other and everyone just being happy to be there despite the freezing cold temperatures, despite every reason to not enjoy the experience. It's the most enjoyable experience you can have. And so, I mean, this past year was my first March for Life on the March for Life team, and to be on the stage while the president was speaking was absolutely mind-blowing. And I can't really level any other experience to that moment of just looking out to the crowd and seeing everybody there, like just enthralled by the program and just so excited to be there. And so those moments are what I'll remember forever, for sure. But I think one of the moments, and going back probably 10 years or so, was, and bringing in live action, the first time that I really felt like a profound call towards the pro-life movement was at a pro-life gala and hearing Lila Rose speak for the first time. It was right, you know, in live action's early days when she was releasing her undercover videos, and those videos left such a deep mark on me that I can still, you know, conjure up those first emotions of feeling the depth of, you know, the pro-life movement. So there are a lot of intense emotions that come with, you know, there's a lot of really negative stuff that you might experience. And then there's those positive moments that really keep everything in balance.
Thanks for all of that, guys. So at this point, we're going to open it up to all of our viewers right now. So please just send in comments through the comment section below, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. But we're going to be starting out with one sent in by Mary Claire. Also, respect with the double name. She wanted to make sure that was known. So she asks, what do you say to someone who says the mother has the right to abort because her child is attached to her, and so it makes the child her, or that no one has a right to use her body, and so she has a right to abort the child?
I don't know who wants to take this. I can take it. So, yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the more common arguments is, you know, it's her body, it's her choice. And obviously we know that that's not true. We know that from the moment of conception, a separate set of DNA is created, and that, yes, of course, that child is going to be dependent on the mother for life until a certain point. But so many of us are dependent on, you know, our parents for a certain period of time. And so as soon as you can, and this is my advice really in general for speaking to these arguments that are the typical sort of talking points, is that once you can pinpoint where the logic falters, it's really easy to just reach the same, you know, pro-life conclusion every time. And so if you can get them to admit that a separate set of DNA means it's a separate life and its own organism, then you've debased the question whether or not it's part of the woman's body. And then as soon as you can get them to admit that dependency on another person for life or for quality of life doesn't negate the value of that life, they have to see that point as well. And so it seems really tricky to get around these questions, but once you pinpoint where the logic falters, it all falls apart. So that's my response to that.
Thanks. So Julia, she wants to know, how do we reach young women and teenage girls who feel like they have to be pro-choice? You see that a lot, especially today, that in order to be pro-woman or a feminist, you have to support the pro-choice opinion. So how can we approach these women in love and show them that pro-life is actually pro-woman?
I can take this one. So I think it's good to break stereotypes. Once the stereotypes are broken, then their arguments are broken. So I think it's really important where March for Life had the theme, pro-life is pro-science. So, you know, usually there's a perception that you're pro-life because it's your religion. But as we could see, there were a lot of people at the March for Life that year showing, you know, maybe I'm an atheist, maybe I'm not a Christian, maybe I just believe in this because I believe in science. And so you can break down that perception. And when it comes to the women argument, you have to let them know that abortion hurts women. It hurts women profusely. I mean, the majority of abortions in China and other countries are young girls. And so you just have to show that this is not true. And you can also take their arguments and use it back against them. and talk about how we should have diversity of thought, and we don't need to all be a monolith. We're all unique individuals, and we can believe what we believe, and you can't really tell us what to believe. So, and to reach out to those young women, I think we're doing a great job on college campuses. We have so many pro-life groups on college campuses, like Students for Life, and then mine, Lone Conservative. We have people writing about the pro-life issue. So it's easy to reach out to young people through college campuses. And then I also think Live Action's doing the best job with reaching out to young people with social media. And they have a very, very young demographic.
That's awesome. So, Cassie, kind of going off of what you just were mentioning about bringing the pro-life movement to college campuses and even into high schools, what progress really is being made? Like over, especially the past few years, have you been seeing a shift towards the pro-life movement and a more conservative mindset in that capacity? Or are you seeing a lot more resistance?
I'm seeing that it's becoming more polarized. So before there were a lot of people who were just in the middle. They didn't know what to think about it. And I think now people are developing their opinions, which means people who are more moderate are either going very pro-life or they're going very pro-abortion. So it's becoming more polarized, but with it becoming more polarized, we are grabbing more people into our realm who are becoming spokespeople for the pro-life movement. And when we say pro-life generation, we do mean it. We have more pro-life young people now than we've ever had before. So it is growing. It's still a struggle, especially there's this notion that you have to shame people who are pro-life now. We see this in college campuses. I went to an all-women's college, a very, very liberal all-women's college. And if I even said I was pro-life in class, which I definitely did a lot, students would be outraged. They'd be so outraged. They would just not even respect who I was as a person anymore because of that. And so what I did was I just really explored my values and wasn't afraid to share them, and need to encourage more young people to do that.
Oh, that's an awesome answer. So Devin, Live Action does have an amazing younger following in the pro-life movement. What advice do you have of being able to engage with the younger generation, so the 24 and under crowd?
Yeah, I think it's important to create content that just resonates with them, right? Like they want to see the beautiful children. They want to see the beauty of choosing life and women overcoming hard circumstances, right? We have, 16, 17-year-olds watching our content. And, when they see people their age embracing life in difficult circumstances at a young age, things like that, I think it really encourages them. And just with the consistently showing them that pro-life is pro-woman, and you are truly empowered when you are embracing life. I think it's just so important, and really just the consistent messaging to these young people specifically, I think will really change the culture.
Awesome. So, Dino, who's from Chicago, wants to know if there's any way that he, as a 16-year-old, can make a difference in building a culture of life. He says that he doesn't see a lot of people around him who share a similar mindset, and does a lot of opportunities for him to really engage in this topic. Do you guys have any advice for someone in that situation?
I feel like I, as a 16-year-old, probably felt the same. I was from a suburban town in Pennsylvania, and living in DC, you feel like you can do anything because the Capitol Hill is right there, and you feel just a little bit closer to where changes are happening. But if you're growing up in a suburb somewhere, you don't really necessarily feel like you can just make an impact, So if I could speak to myself as a 16-year-old, I would probably, have the same message as this 16-year-old from Chicago, is that there really is so much to be done on both a social level and on a political level. And I'm just learning this now over the last, few months, how much the political side of things is important as well. We do a lot of public policy lobbying on Capitol Hill, and the more interaction that I have with members of Congress, or just anyone that works on the Hill, is that they really do take the input of, their constituents into consideration. So whether or not you're able to make headway in your school or with your friends, or you feel really dejected because no one wants to give you the time of day on a social plane, the political plane is just as important in affecting real change in our government. So you can imagine that our senators and state representatives get emails and they get tweets and they get letters and things like that. But if a 16-year-old shows interest in these things, that immediately catches their attention, and they're going to really take to heart a bold 16-year-old who's going to stand up for what he believes in, and can, sort of take that message and amplify it. So, and I don't know that I would have believed this when I was 16, except that this is exactly what I'm hearing from our lawmakers all the time, is if you can sit down and write a letter to your lawmakers, or you can go to your state capitol building or even your local town, city hall, and sit down and speak to someone there, it has a really big impact. And maybe that could shape the way that your town, carries out its pro-life message.
I like to add to that too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Devin. As somebody who is from Massachusetts, who's pro-life, and then went to an all-women's college where nobody was pro-life, and now living in Los Angeles, I sympathize with somebody living in Chicago who's pro-life and wants to get involved. My advice to you is to find your own communities, whether they're online or whether you're looking out for the local pregnancy resource center or looking for any local clubs at your high school or maybe one of the colleges you want to go to. Get involved with them. Look out for your communities. I created my nonprofit Lone Conservative because I wanted to find the conservative community because I didn't have that. So a lot of it's virtual, and then we meet up a few times a year at conferences. So just reach out. We are out there. Pro-lifers are out there. You just have to find us in some cities, and I wish you luck, and I think you'll be able to do it. Just use Google and keep searching.
Yeah, and building off of that, I would say to be confident and bold, knowing that 80% of Americans support really significant restrictions on abortion or a complete ban on abortion, period. Knowing that you are not alone and you can be bold in that. Somebody might not be vocally pro-life around you, but there are a lot of pro-lifers around you that you may not know. And even people who are not pro-life, I think a lot of people are apathetic or just don't have a position on abortion. Mm-hmm. Or they're even pro-choice, but don't actually know what choice they're defending, right? And so I think it's really crucial that we share the reality of abortion, right? Whether that's showing them abortion procedures video, and just really showing that the choice that you're so-called defending is really a choice that involves poisoning innocent children or tearing the limbs off and really crushing their skulls until they die. Like, that is the reality of choice. And I think when people really know what being pro-choice means, they really quickly change their position. This is something we see at Live Action all the time.
Oh, really great responses, all three of you guys. So rolling off of that, James would like to know what resources he could find on being able to talk more confidently about the topic of life to other people, whether they agree with him or not, or where he can find reliable resources really on a range of the different issues that surround abortion.
It's definitely Devin's realm.
Yes, I would first say make sure you're following all of the pro-life leaders, Kristen Hawkins, Lila Rose, Jeannie Mancini, everyone, and see what they're messaging and what they're standing for and what they're communicating. I think that's crucial. And also read pro-life books. And there's one of my favorite books of all time is Pro-Life Responses to Pro-Choice Arguments by Randy Alcorn. It's really good. There's probably hundreds, maybe 1,000 arguments that you'll hear often from pro-choicers, and it'll give you perfect ways to respond to them.
And if that's the book that I'm thinking of, I have, if not, it's one very similar. It was written in the 70s, and every single word in that book is still the exact arguments that they're using today. And so it really is timeless. And from my own experience, the confidence that comes with being really well informed about the statistics and just how to sort of break down these arguments does so much just for your own confidence when going into those conversations. You know, the best way to avoid ending up in a screaming match with someone is to be really sure of what you're saying and to have a response for every argument you know they're going to try and raise against you. So yeah, those resources are all fantastic, and I would 100% say that that is the key to being, just a really sort of effective, apologetic, argumenter. So that's my advice there.
And to add on to that, just real quick, the pro-life movement realizes this is an issue. They realize that more people need to have the confidence and the knowledge to be pro-life. And that's why so many pro-life organizations are putting out videos telling you how to respond to these arguments. Live Action has a whole series about how to respond to pro-choice arguments. And there's just so many different types of content out there that are trying to help you with this. So I would do some research and just try to make yourself well-informed.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And Nadette would like to have the name of that book repeated one more time. So Devin?
It is Pro-Life Responses to Pro-Choice Arguments by Randy Alcorn.
There we go. And we'll put a link to that book also in the comments after this feed ends, Nadette. So this is a pretty common situation we see. Becca is saying that she's applying to med school and she's interested in being an OBGYN. But she's nervous about picking this as her specialty because she strongly believes that abortion is wrong. And she's worried about how her professors are going to be teaching abortion, potentially requiring her to perform abortions, or at least study the methodology of it in class. And she doesn't know if it's right for her to choose this specialty under that circumstance.
I could take that. Because I used to deal with hiding what I believe all the time in class. Now I don't. I'm going to a grad school. It's very friendly to the pro-life movement. What I would say is you have to, and Ben Shapiro says this too, you have to decide if it's worth pushing your own ideas or just getting the A. Mm-hmm. In the case of somebody being a pro-life OBGYN, I would say I would get the A. So when you're just getting your undergrad, it's not that big of a deal. You could probably still do well, even having your own beliefs. So what I would say is learning about abortion is probably a great thing. Even if you're being taught that it's an okay thing, learning about it is good. You're equipping yourself to go out and inform people what is actually happening, because most people don't understand. Now, if it goes down the trail where you're required to do an abortion, that's when you need to call a lawyer and you need to say, no, I'm not doing that.
But also, you're not alone. I was just listening last week. We had, Dr. Christina Francis on, who's the head of APLOG, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, and she was citing that over 80% of all OBGYNs refuse to perform abortion. So it's not like you're part of this majority or minority of OBGYNs who are not performing abortions. You're part of the majority of OBGYNs who do not perform abortions. So that has to be the most empowering thing to know to go into that profession, is that you're in the majority of people who won't perform abortions.
And there's a national organization too, right, of pro-life OBGYNs?
Yeah,
APLOG. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would follow up on that. And you're exactly right, Mackenzie. There's only 14% of OBGYNs that actually commit abortions, which also is a question, like, if abortion is healthcare, why aren't OBGYNs performing it? And it once again shows that abortion is killing, and real doctors, like the woman commented, real doctors know that abortion kills an innocent human being, and therefore they will refuse to commit them. And I really applaud you going to OBGYN field, because it is really needed and really crucial to have people like you, pro-lifers, in the field, especially when we're dealing with more complex issues.
For sure.
Fantastic. So a similar question would be, if you're not going into, say, a medical field, but you still are getting exposed to the pro-life, pro-choice ideology on your college campus, what's the best approach with bringing up these conversations, be it in the classroom or with just classmates that you see on your college campus or in your high school classroom?
Okay. Do you want to take it, or?
No, I was just thinking, so I went to a very small Jesuit school in Spain, actually, and I didn't have a lot of these problems. There were students who came from all over the world, And I feel like in America, we have this unique situation of like extreme polarity around this problem. But I went to school with people from over 70 or 80 different countries, and everyone was sort of open to dialogue about these things. And I never had this problem. So I was going to ask you if you wanted to take this one.
So I just bring it up. We'll be in the middle of a conversation about something, and I'm not afraid. I'll raise my hand and I'll say, well, this seems like hypocrisy, like abortion, and I will just bring it up. And this is true to my undergraduate experience and my graduate experience. I go to a more conservative grad school. I go to Pepperdine. They're very welcome to diverse beliefs there. Mount Holyoke, my undergrad, not so much. But I would just bring it up. I have really thick skin. It takes a lot to get to me. And that's something I had to condition myself to get to. Not everyone can handle that. I've seen conservatives get bullied on campus and absolutely just have a breakdown. So you need to take care of yourself. If you can handle the backlash, and sometimes it's really cruel. I had some horrible things happen to me at undergrad. If you can take it, then speak it. Say what you believe in. I have had girls after class talk to me and say, hey, I'd love to get coffee and talk more about your beliefs. Now they would add the caveat, well, don't tell anyone that we're going to hang out and get coffee. I don't want people not to like me, but I would like to talk about your beliefs. So if you can handle criticism, do it in the classroom. But what I would say is you can better convince people to the pro-life movement with people you already have connections to. So people you're already friends with, they respect your opinion more because they're already your friend, more than the random student sitting in your classroom. So make friends with these people and then try to talk about it. And don't push it on them. You want to discuss it with them, but don't shame them for being pro-abortion or anything like that, because you're not going to convince them that way. You want to talk to them on a very strictly respectful basis where you're sharing your beliefs. But just figure out if you can take the criticism. That's my number one piece of advice.
Yeah, and something I've found is people who are really open to having conversations can really easily be shifted. Their positions on abortion can really, really easily be shifted. And that's because our belief is grounded in science and basic decency, right? Life begins at fertilization, and it's always wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. And therefore, it's pretty simple, right? Obviously, there's a little bit of nuance. But everything has an answer, and the pro-life message is so consistent in the defense of life.
And one more thing, going into being pro-life and being pro-choice, like I said, it's not just a switch. It doesn't just switch. You're not just pro-life one day. It's going to be a very gradual process. You're not going to accept everything that the pro-life movement preaches right away. It's going to be very gradual. So a lot of times we see, well, okay, abortion after the heartbeat's a bad idea. And then you say, well, the heartbeat it could be between 6 to 8 weeks, and then, or even earlier, and some studies have shown. And then they say, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And so it's a slow process, and they'll move into it gradually, but you just have to keep up the conversation.
And I would say, like, ultimately, just whatever you are going to share with another person, do it with love. There's enough vitriol coming from the other side. And we've all seen that just turning into screaming and bullying and, vandalizing. And we don't need to be perpetuating any of that. So when you are getting into these conversations, if it starts getting to, an emotional level where it's going to get ugly, just do what you can to steer it back towards love and rationality.
Right. And I would also encourage people to find common ground. Right. And so it's very rare when you have somebody who is pro-abortion or pro-choice to hate women or to support abortion wholeheartedly. There's always a point of agreement that you can find. A lot of pro-choicers think that they're helping women by being pro-choice. Right. And just presenting the other side, the life-affirming side, that women can be strong enough, women are strong enough and can succeed without killing their children. Like, that is such a positive, life-affirming message. And even people on the other side will say, like, I think women should be supported. I love the work. I think there should be more resources available. And we're like, yeah, we agree. That's why we have pregnancy resource centers. And so just finding points where you guys can agree on and build off of that. And just knowing that the pro-life movement is so winsome and beautiful, and we can really easily win people onto our side.
Awesome points all around. So Matthew's question actually plays in, I think, to some of the points you were making, Devin. He wants to know how you can counter the pro-choice argument about the health of the mother. And so we all want to make sure that women are being treated well and that we're meeting all of their medical and healthcare needs. And so often I feel pro-lifers struggle with the health of the mother argument. And so is abortion ever medically necessary to aid the health of the mother?
No, it's not. So abortion is never medically necessary. Thousands of OBGYNs have affirmed this through the Dublin Declaration. There's 4,500 OBGYNs with APOG, like the organization we mentioned earlier. The direct and intentional killing of a child is never necessary, right? It sometimes might be necessary if there is a severe life-threatening ailment like preeclampsia or severe uterine infection. And in order to save the woman's life, you have to deliver the child early. But delivering a child early, sometimes it's not possible for the baby to survive prematurely. But the doctors will do everything they can to preserve both patients, right? Real doctors know that there's a patient in the womb and a patient outside the womb. That's why we're performing prenatal surgery. We're taking babies out of the womb, performing surgery on them, removing tumors, fixing spina bifida, and place them back inside the womb. I didn't know you can operate on just clumps of cells, right? And so just placing them back into the womb and it recognizes that there are two patients present, and real doctors work to preserve both lives.
That's so true. And for more resources on responding to this question, AppLog is really a fantastic resource. They have multiple articles written on this. We just had Dr. Christina Francis on last week, and watching that, she gave a wonderful response as a certified medical professional for that. And Live Action itself has multiple articles and resources on this topic. So I really encourage reaching out and digging into the medical science behind this. Abortion is never medically necessary. And there's so many resources out there to really provide the healthcare needed for a mother that are truly pro-life. So thank you for that one, Devin. Moving over to the more political realm, we have a question from Daniel. So Daniel wants to know what's going to exactly happen if Roe v. Wade is ever overturned, and what will the pro-life movement have to do after this point?
So from a political perspective here, if Roe versus Wade was overturned, every state would then have, their own jurisdiction in that matter. And on that front, we're seeing more and more states pass pro-life legislation and putting heavier bans on abortion, most of which are then challenged at the national level because they are deemed unconstitutional because of Roe versus Wade. But if Roe were overturned, then the fight would be returning to the state level. So absolutely, that is where we need to be, I think, placing a lot of our focus is on our state representatives so that they know that who their constituents are and they know how their constituents vote. So while we think that everything is always done at a national level and we need to be contacting all of our leaders on Capitol Hill, your state level representatives are just as important and will be even more important if and when Roe is overturned. So know who your state reps are, know how to contact them. I can sort of plug our own, system in here. If you text the word March to 73075, you can join our national advocacy platform where we can connect you directly with your leaders, both on the state level and the national level and even the local level. And you'll get sort of pro-life alerts as they come up so that you can be immediately acting on them. And so, yeah, just that's my advice is for us to keep our eyes on the state level for sure. And obviously a lot has to happen on the national level for it to come to that. But I think that's the next frontier for the pro-life movement.
Yeah, it's a great point. And something also keep in mind, Roe v. Wade, Doe v. Bolton, all the companion cases, they're unconstitutional at face value. Like those rulings were unconstitutional from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And preborn children, all it will take to protect them by law is just understanding that they should be guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and property, right? So, and this should be covered and affirmed by the 5th and 14th Amendment. All it will take was just the Supreme Court recognizing this fact that people in the womb are still people that should be guaranteed equal protection as you and I.
Fantastic responses. So as we start to wrap things up, I wanted to ask all three of you guys, what one piece of advice would you have for the pro-life movement, especially the pro-life generation? Mackenzie,
I can go first.
Oh, Cassie.
I'm all about getting involved. I hear too often from college students, I'm busy, I have too much to do during school. No, you don't. No, you don't. Especially if you're a college student, I'm talking to you. You are not too busy to get involved in the pro-life generation. I worked more than full-time in college, took extra classes, and was still being an activist. So you have time, make the time. This is an important movement. And right now, you're sitting on your couch doing nothing for the next who knows how long. This is the time to get involved. You can get involved virtually right now by first educating yourself, maybe writing a few articles and sending them to your local newspaper or talking to some friends. This is the perfect time to learn about the pro-life movement and equip yourself to go out afterwards and go to the conferences when we start having them again and do other things that are contributing to the pro-life cause. But my piece of advice is get involved and get involved now.
Yes, and our generation is so creative and so talented. I think all it takes is just identify your gifts and skills, whether that be graphic design, photography, counseling, public speaking, and taking that and finding a way to utilize that in the pro-life movement, whether that be supporting an existing pro-life group or nonprofit, or even starting your own, right? I think there's so many ways you can get involved. And if you ever need help with that, feel free to reach out to one of us. We will be happy to help get you plugged in. But I would just say use your talents, your gifts to further the movement.
And I think if there's anything to add to that, those are both, really wonderful points. I think that my advice to our generation would be, like I said earlier, is to just be really confident in your responses to all of these arguments, to know what you're talking about. And I think also to know that you're part of a very, very large and wonderful community. I remember when I was younger, really, really young, having sort of that initial embarrassment about being pro-life, and thinking that only weirdos were pro-life, and that is so quickly debased when you look around and you see the most creative, beautiful, loving, passionate, and even just super cool people are part of the pro-life movement, and just to know that you're surrounded by people who are going to be just like you and or very different from you too. There's a ton of diversity as well. Just to know that you're not alone is a huge thing, I think, for a lot of people our age to really branch out and to say what they believe.
Awesome. So we're going to close things out with letting all of our viewers today know how they can stay in contact with three very cool pro-lifers. So could you guys share how people can follow you on social media or reach out to you in any way? Cassie, we'll start with you.
Sure. So if you do want to get involved and you're on the conservative side of the spectrum, even if you're on the left side and you're pro-life, I'll take an article from you, but you can submit articles to Lone Conservative. That is my online national student platform for college students. So if you want to learn how to be a writer, we'll teach you and we'll publish you. So that's one way to get involved. And then I live on Twitter. So if you want to contact me, my DMs are open. I do respond to people. And then I also have Facebook, TikTok, and Locals, which is Dave Rubin's new social media platform, which is competing with Patreon. So plenty of ways to contact me.
Love it.
And then another way I think here is you're also able to join Live Action's ambassador program at ambassadors.liveaction.org. And there we'll fully educate you on the pro-life movement and the history of it and really how you can get involved and get plugged in. And beyond that, I would just encourage you just to follow Live Action, our president, Mila Rose. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're everywhere. So follow us on your favorite platform of choice and be fully educated on what you stand for.
And I'm not an influencer or anything. If you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is Ken's Rogers, I believe. But really, March for Life is the organization that I'm a part of, and Anne Claire runs all of our social media and all of that, and it's always fantastic. So definitely follow our social media there. And like I said, my area of expertise is in the grassroots sort of public policy realm. So if you want to go over to our website to sign up for our pro-life alerts, then you'll be hearing directly from me. So that's really, it would make me really happy if you signed up for our pro-life alerts.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you guys all so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of our viewers for sending in your questions and just participating in this, and hoping just to build a culture of life in your own unique way. Remember that the pro-life movement, it loves every single life, and it needs every single life and voice out there to be promoting and advocating for the most vulnerable among us, the unborn. So stay strong. Keep just showing love and joy for life out there, and be sure to just get involved with the pro-life movement through all three of these amazing organizations. So thank you to everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.